Before we get going, I'd like to just do a little warm-up exercise. And so if everybody can open up their chat box, and then in your chat box, write your favorite fruit. Whoa, couple mangoes, another mango. Mango's good. A pluot, papaya. That's great. Well, thank you everybody for doing that. And as we go along, if you do have questions, then feel free to unmute yourself and ask. Otherwise, you can write your question in the chat box, and Raphael will be monitoring that and let me know if a question comes up. So without further ado, let's start with the problem. Employee engagement. So in the last Gallup poll in 2019, they determined that for US employees, the rate of engagement for employees said that they were engaged with their work was only 35%. Now that's before we've transitioned to a virtual world. So what do you think that looks like now? Better or worse? It's probably even more difficult to stay engaged in the work from home environment where we're dealing with being isolated from the team and also other distractions that keep us from fully engaging with the work. Now, what do you think the #1 reason is? 70% of respondents said was the main reason for low engagement. It was the relationship with the direct manager. So low engagement can be improved by you. You have the control to improve the engagement of your team with techniques that we'll talk about today to help you improve those relationships. So the main tool that we're talking about today is rapport, building rapport with your teammates. Rapport is how you build relationships with your teammates. And by doing that, you're going to increase engagement and performance of your team. You'll learn to communicate more effectively. You'll learn to modulate your own behaviors so they match better with the team. And I don't often use the word modulate, but I thought I'd be able to use it with this crowd. So thank you for understanding what modulate means. And what we're trying to do here is to build trust. When you have trust, you have rapport, and then you have more engagement. And the tool that we're going to be talking about tonight is the enneagram. And the enneagram is a fantastic tool for building rapport. So we have a natural rapport building mechanism it's innate to us, and it's called mirroring. If you've ever been in a conversation with somebody and you're sitting across from them or even to their side, after a while, we unconsciously start to assume the same body position as the person we're talking to. So why are we doing that? It's a way of us communicating non-verbally with the other person to say, hey, I'm like you. We're in this together. We're birds of a feather. We're two peas in a pod. It's our unconscious way of building rapport with that other person. And there's other ways that you can do this. Another is vocal pace. Some people talk fast and they like, having a fast-paced conversation. So you could speed up your vocal pace. Some are slower. You can slow it down. There's another way that you can mirror people, and that's with values. And the Enneagram provides a way to mirror those values that are important to people. If you understand the Enneagram type of somebody and you know what their values are, then you can start to modulate and mirror those conversations to reflect back the values that are important to them. That helps you build rapport. When a few months ago, I conducted a workshop with a group that was all Enneagram aware. So everybody knew their Enneagram type. And they've been using the Enneagram for a long time. And I asked them this question. I asked them, who was your best friend in high school? And looking back, what Enneagram type do you think they were? And then we went around the room and asked people to describe their best friend. And the pattern became very clear right away that their best friends were the same type as themselves. So that's just more evidence that we're more comfortable with people that are like us, and in as much as we can mirror the behaviors of others back to them, they will feel more comfortable with you. So, I got into all of this, back in the 90s. I was an electrical engineer, and my management came to me and said, Matt, we want you to take a management role. And I asked them, why? I don't know anything about management. And they said, Matt, you'll be fine. Just do it. I'm like, okay. Well, being me, I wasn't fine, and I needed to figure out how to get smart about, being an effective manager. So I started reading, and I read every book I could get my hands on. In the course of that, I came across this thing called the Enneagram. Fascinating. And like with any of the tools that I came across, I would experiment with it and test it. And, if it works, I'll keep using it. And if it doesn't work, I'll discard it and move on to the next thing. Well, 20 years later, I'm still using the Enneagram, and I'm still learning from it. And in fact, although, it's most commonly thought of a personality system, it's actually much more than that. And I've used it in multiple ways. And one of the most powerful ways I've found is to use it as a framework for team-based problem solving. And that's what I wrote my book about. Teamwork 9.0 is about team-based problem solving. And in it, I also talk about leadership and leadership growth, creativity, time perspectives. In other words, are people thinking about the future? Are they thinking about the past? Are they acting with urgency? Are they acting with patience? And what does problem solving require at each step in problem solving? Because there is a pace to that. And all of this comes distilled from the Enneagram. And also, if you're an engineer, I put in some diagnostic tools in there so that you can analyze your own team and figure out where it's going to excel at problem solving and where it may be more challenged, and then tips for how to compensate for that to make sure that your team effectively gets from problem identification to problem resolution. So let me just say a few words about the Enneagram before we jump in. Now, this isn't a beginning Enneagram class tonight. You don't need to know the Enneagram to get something out of this, but it helps, and I hope that it encourages you to look more into it. I'm going to give you one very practical application of how I use it, and it can be used as a manager to build rapport, but it can be used for many things, and I hope you just get a taste of that tonight. So the Enneagram goes back, it's an ancient system with roots back to Greece and Egypt. It's comprised of 9 types, and as you can see in this diagram, there's 3 groups of 3. And those 3 groups, these the 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, 7, these are called the centers. And I'll interchange the word center or triad, but these are the main centers. And they're often called the gut center, the heart center, or the head center. So I'll be referring to these as we go through tonight. And we're not going to have time to go into the lines in the middle tonight. So we're just going to stay on the main core types. But in the future, it would be very interesting to understand the lines in the center as well. So as I'm going through these, I want you to think about the following. Think of a teammate who matches one of these styles that I describe, and identify that style with this Enneagram type. And then think about what has worked well for you in building rapport with that style and what hasn't worked so well. And after I run through the numbers 1 through 9, then we'll have a breakout session where you'll be able to go and talk with some other folks about your experiences building rapport with these various types. So let's jump right in. The first one that we'll talk about is type 1. And type 1 is in the gut center, and the underlying issue there is anger. And how anger manifests itself in type 1 is that there is a critical inner voice in their head. And that voice is saying, that's not right. It shouldn't be that way. You need to fix it. You can do better. So this little voice in their head is essentially a constant companion that is compelling them to get things right. So when you're working with a teammate who is a type 1, you need to understand that there is that voice in their head that's driving them and compelling them, and you can help them, because what they need to get things right are primarily information and time. So in as much as you can be providing them with information about the issue and then the time they need to work on it to their standard, and they have set a very high standard for themselves, that allows you to build rapport with that person. Now, one of the things that you'll want to be careful of with the type 1 is to criticize the work. Why is that? Well, that little voice in their head has already been criticizing them 10 times more than any criticism you could levy against them. So all it ends up doing is just reminding them that it's still not right, and actually ends up being a discouragement rather than an encouragement. So you want to be careful about criticizing, because they already know. So on the other side of that is you want to talk about the goals, and that's how you keep them on track to make sure that they're staying towards resolving the issue. Now, when you're having a conversation with a 1, they're very good at detailing all the things wrong. And this is a great time for you to use and practice your listening skills. So you want to listen to them. You let them exhaustively go through the list of problems associated with that issue. And you don't want to be judgmental. You just want to listen compassionately and empathetically as they go through this. And then as they have exhausted their list, that's when you can turn the conversation to, well, how things should be. And 1s are very good at knowing exactly how things should be. So now you can have that conversation with them about what the goal is, because that's really what you're talking about when you're talking about how it should be. What's it going to look like when the problem is resolved? So those are some tips for having conversations with the 1 where you're mirroring back the concerns, the things that are important to the 1. All right, let's move on to the 2. Now, when we go to the 2 from the 1, we're going from the gut center to the heart center. So 2 is in the heart center. The issue in the heart center is emotions. So for the 2, what they want to have is an external emotional connection with you. So they want to essentially have a relationship with you. So the great thing about the 2s and building rapport with the 2s is that the only thing you have to do is not get in the way of them building rapport with you, because that's really what they're trying to do. And the way they do that, the way they establish that emotional connection with you, is by helping you. So they go out of their way to find some way to help you. And in doing so, they in return expect appreciation. So you thank the 2 for whatever they've done for you, and then that tells the 2, signals to them, we're now building our relationship. Remember that for 2s, appreciation is like oxygen. So oxygen is something that you need all the time. We breathe constantly. If our oxygen supply is cut off, we suffocate. So for the 2, if the supply of appreciation is cut off, they can get grumpy. So if you know a 2 and they're being grumpy, it's probably because they're not being appreciated like they expect to be appreciated for something they did. And that's something that you can work on with them to understand, what happened and what appreciation that they expect. And if you can, you deliver that appreciation to help them kind of get back on track. So when I was I was working at a startup company and working in a small office, And I was a program manager at the time, and I would be printing out documents on the printer. And across the hall from me, a little bit closer to the printer, was our VP of sales. And it was a curious thing because every time I printed out something on the printer, the VP of sales would hear the printer go off. He would get up, he would go over, he'd get the printing and bring it to me. And I would say, oh, thank you for doing that. No problem. And that became kind of a pattern. And at one point, I was a little bit worried because I thought, the VP of sales, he's probably really busy, and I don't want to be distracting him from doing that. And so one time I said, I really appreciate you doing this, but you really don't need to do that. That was not the thing he wanted to hear. I was cutting off his oxygen supply, and he got grumpy. And for the next couple of days, I noticed that he was just very grumpy with me. So I was just learning the enneagram at that point, and I thought, well, maybe he's a 2. So I tried an experiment. I went in, and I was doing a lot of communication with customers. So I would pick a communication with a customer, an email communication, and before I sent it over, I sent it to the VP of sales, and I said, I need to send out this communication, but would you review it for me and give me your feedback before I send it out? And just doing that completely turned around our relationship because I was providing a way for him to help me, and it was providing a platform for me to appreciate him. And we became best buddies after that. So that's how easy it is to develop a relationship and rapport with the type 2. All right, moving on to type 3. Again, in the emotion center, and the 3 is the suppressed emotion type. So let me just stop and take a moment and say that there's a pattern here. In each center, there's an external, an internal, and a suppressed version of each. So for instance, in the emotion center, there's the external emotion, which is the 2. There's the internal emotion, which is the 4, and the suppressed emotion, which is the 3. And that pattern persists for each one of the triads. So that's why I'm saying external, internal, and suppressed. Where external is my external relationship with people, internal is what's going on inside of me, and then suppressed is where I suppress that motivating driver of that center. So the 3 suppresses emotion. So rather than appreciation, they're looking for acknowledgement of their accomplishments. They want to know that you understand that they have achieved, and they want to be recognized for that. So a great way to build rapport with the 3 is to recognize their accomplishments. Another way is to provide them paths to continue to succeed and continue to accomplish. The 3s are some of the hardest workers of the enneagram. They want to achieve, they want to get it done, they want to move on to the next thing so they can succeed at that too. And so they're continually working hard to get and achieve success. So, another thing about the 3s is not only do they want to succeed, they want to appear successful. And so you'll often find that 3s are dressed for success. That phrase really describes the 3. So appearances matter to the 3. and they will make sure that they pay attention to those details. Now, the threes are interesting in that they're able to generate a lot of very unique ideas. Now, something interesting happens when we're generating ideas. For most of us, we have emotional filters that are blocking us from considering a lot of ideas because we already discard those ideas before we've given them an airing. We're afraid that, you know, it's a bad idea or, you know, whatever. So we don't even say it. Well, if you're suppressing your emotion, then essentially you're turning off that filter. So you're able to throw out all kinds of different ideas. You're not really sure how people are going to react to them, but you're going to throw them out. And there's another phrase, throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks. That's the way that the three can generate ideas, which is great because now you're getting a very broad set of different ideas. And what they'll want is help with understanding, you know, which of the ideas are going to be best suited for the group to tackle. And so that's another area that you can help with the three. And then finally, threes are very competitive. And so if you want to build rapport with the three, you can find venues for friendly competition. So in school, in college, one of my best friends was a three, and we, taking a break from homework, we would go and play ping pong. We played ping pong for hours. It was our friendly competition, and it was a great way of bonding with the three. All right, moving on to the four. So this is the internal emotional type. So for the internal emotional type, the emotions are inside of them. And if you remember the movie Shrek, there was a scene where Shrek was talking to Donkey, and Shrek says, ogres are like onions because we have layers. So the layers that Shrek is talking about is layers of feelings. Shrek was a type 4, and that movie is essentially an illustration of the relationship between a type 4 and a type 7. Donkey's the type 7. But the type 4 has all of these layers and layers of emotion going on inside of them and feelings. So if you ask a 4, how are you feeling? They're going to say, I'm feeling fine. But what they're thinking is, that's a ridiculous question. How can I tell you what I'm feeling when I'm feeling everything? I'm feeling, you know, the world around me. I'm feeling the different people on the gallery view. I'm looking at all of their backgrounds. I'm feeling all of that. And it's layer upon layer of feelings that I'm feeling. But if I actually said that, you'd think I was crazy. So I've learned to just say, I'm feeling fine. So because the 4s have so much going on inside in terms of feelings, they tend to be guarded about that. So the way for you to essentially make the 4 feel safe, that it's okay to talk about feelings, is if you start and you talk about your own feelings. 4s love those conversations, and they would welcome that conversation. And you'll find that as you're having that conversation, they'll be able to not only empathize with whatever you're feeling, but they'll actually be able to give you insights about it that you may not even have thought of. And these are the kind of conversations that fours love, and it's a great way of building rapport with them. All right, so I'm going to now move on to type 5. And as we move to type 5, we're moving from the feelings triad over to the head and thinking triad. And in this triad, the underlying issue is anxiety. The 5 is the internal anxiety type. And the way that the 5 addresses their anxiety is by collecting resources. If I collect resources, then I feel safe. I call type 5 the squirrels of the enneagram because, like squirrels, they go around, they collect all of their nuts, and then they hide all of their nuts, and then they keep their nuts secure. So what's a nut for the type 5? A few things, but one of them is information and knowledge. And so the 5s tend to be highly expert, and they go very deep in certain areas. They go so deep in those areas that they actually start to feel very comfortable in their field of expertise. And that's what allows them to actually come out of their shell, because they've built up that base of knowledge where they feel secure and safe. And to build rapport with a 5, you want to acknowledge their ability and their expertise in their fields, and in as much as you can, engage them in that area of expertise and work with them in that, and they'll appreciate that and enjoy that. And so that's a great way to build rapport with the 5. They're always seeking new knowledge, and so in as much as you can provide them with new, interesting, useful information, that's a great way to build rapport with the 5. 5s tend to get bored very easily, and so in as much as you can be amusing and entertaining and try to keep it interesting for them, then that goes a long way to building the relationship and keeping it interesting for them. So my wife is a 5, so I've got to know this type particularly well, and in as much as we've been married for almost 30 years, I can safely say that I've built up some rapport with her. So one story I can tell you about is when we go, and she would kill me if she knew I was telling this, by the way, but when we go to a restaurant, she will want to look at the entire menu, top to bottom, scour the entire thing. And after she scoured it, I made my decision probably before we got into the restaurant. I already kind of knew what I wanted to get. She needs to look at the whole menu. And then even after she's done that, she can't decide. So why can't she decide? There's a fear, there's an anxiety of not making the right choice. And so I can help her by talking through the options that are interesting to her and letting her talk about the pros and cons of each. And in doing that, it helps her come to a point where she can make a decision. So that's another very valuable conversation to have with a 5 and a way to build rapport. All right. Now we're at the suppressed anxiety. And so for 6, they are able to keep their anxiety down as long as they know what's going to happen. So they're always thinking about the future, trying to anticipate, what if this happens? What if that happens? It's like their mind is a simulator that's just constantly simulating different scenarios. So I'm pretty well versed with this type because I am a type 6. So I know very well how my mind races on all the different possibilities, all the things that could happen. And so one of the things that 6s like is to have conversations about the future. Those are the favorite conversations with the 6. They tend not to be have conversations about reminiscing so much, thinking about the past, but rather thinking about the future. And so the reason why they're doing that is they're looking out to see what may happen so that they can make the appropriate preparations. So when you're working with a 6 and working with the fact that they've kind of modeled out the future, they tend to not like surprises. So, because when you have a surprise, what happens? The anxiety starts to rise up. And then as you address that, then it goes back down. So it's like almost like a thermometer inside of you, with the anxiety level is the liquid in the thermometer. The other thing that 6s are doing is, if you say you're going to do something, then they're expecting you to do it. And they're looking for you to meet expectations, and they're looking for consistency. And those are the things that are very important to a 6. And in as much as you can be consistent with the 6 and meet expectations, give them forewarning about things. If you think things might not be going to plan, that keeps the anxiety of the 6 down. The 6 will appreciate it, and you can build rapport with them. And just on a final note, 6s love to build plans. So they often take roles in project management and roles where they can plan things out and also mitigate risk. All right, moving on to the 7. This is your external anxiety type. And remember, the external part means that it depends on people outside of them. So for the way the 7s address their anxiety is, if we're okay, my anxiety goes down. So they just want to know that you like them. If you like the 7, then their anxiety goes down. And it's really not hard to like the 7s, because they tend to be very charming, very amusing, very talkative, and very engaging. And those are their mechanisms for making sure that people like them. So I said there were 2 types that it's easy to build rapport with. Type 7 is the other one. So it's type 2 and type 7. So type 7 is very easy to build rapport with, because again, they want to be liked and they'll engage you. And if you mirror that back, that you are having fun with them and you like them, then you're building rapport with them. The 7s love interaction. they're interacting with people all the time. They're often the types in an office setting who they're wandering around and, just picking up and having conversations with people, because that's kind of what they do. So just as a note, in a work from home environment, I imagine that it can be very challenging for sevens because they're cut off from this way that they normally interact with people. And I'm sure that they're participating in Zoom calls and conversations and all of that, but I expect that it's challenging for them. So if one of your teammates is a 7, you want to understand that and know that cutting off, being isolated is likely to be causing their anxiety to go up. And so maybe you can help them with that by engaging with them. All right. Number 8. So we just finished working through the head triad, and now we're back into the gut triad. Now, the first type 1 was also in the gut triad. That was the internal anger. 8 is the external anger, okay? And so this type is actually the type in the Enneagram that's most comfortable with anger. Anger is a tool that they use. And the tool is deployed when they feel like they aren't in control of their environment. So when they want to secure control of the environment, anger comes out and they use that anger to secure control. So you'll notice that the 8s have a very, I would say, punchy style. They don't use a lot of words. They kind of think and talk in bullet points. And, they, rather than emails, they'll prefer a brief text. So they just want to communicate in bullet points, and they want you to communicate to them in bullet points. So they want you to just get to the point so we can get to action. The 8s are very action oriented. They want to be doing something and not talking. And so if we can get to the point, we can get to action. Now I can tell you as a 6, I don't think that way. I like context. I like to know all the details. I like to have all the background. I like to understand how you arrived at that conclusion. And so when I communicate, I often speak and give a lot of context rather than just getting to the point. But this is very frustrating for the 8. They don't like that style. So when I know that I'm communicating to an 8, I flip that on its head. I start with dessert. I get to the point. I just say the point. And then if the 8 wants more context, if the 8 wants more detail, they'll ask for it. So they'll ask, and I will give the context as much as they want, and I let them lead that. And in doing it that way, it's much more comfortable for them and allows them to get the information that they need to move forward and get back to action. So, and I also, in this slide, I tried to make it a point to use far fewer words. So it's just bullet points, just a few words with the bullet points, because that's the way the 8 would like it. All right, so now we're at the 9, and this is the suppressed anger type, okay? And what they're after is to eliminate any conflict from the environment. So they're constantly on the lookout and thinking about, how can I make sure that there's no confrontation and there's no conflict with anybody? They're able to put themselves in other people's perspectives and appreciate them, so that whenever they communicate with them, they'll do it in a way that is very conflict-free. That's important for them, and that's the way they're communicating. Conversely, they are very reluctant to share their own opinions. So why is that? Well, if I express my own opinion, then somebody might not agree with that, and that might lead to a conflict. So the nines want to avoid that, and so it's better not to push them to share their own opinions. Since they're so great at understanding people's perspectives, they're often in mediative roles because they can see both sides and they can find the middle ground necessary to keep the or resolve any kind of conflict. So imagine you're going to be going out to lunch. Back in the days when we could go out to lunch, you're going to go out to lunch with your friend who's a 9, and you say, okay, where do you want to go for lunch? And the 9 will say, I don't know, where do you want to go for lunch? And then the person says, no, it's your turn. And then a few people more come over and they turn to the 9 and say, hey, where do you want to go to lunch? And the 9's going, well, I don't know, I know you like Mexican, and I know you like Chinese food, and they're like, but it's your birthday. You get to choose. So now you've put the 9 on the spot to choose where to go to lunch. Is the 9 thinking about where they want to go? No, they are not thinking about where they want to go. They are thinking about where you want to go to lunch. And you, and you, and you. And they're trying to see if they can figure out a way to pick a restaurant that everybody likes, so there'll be no conflict. They always will put their needs last in that situation. And that's the 9. So that is the quick rundown of the 9 ways to get along with the 9 enneagram types. So the interesting thing, if your boss is an 8, the 8 is in that intuitive center. So oftentimes 8s have already intuited what they want to happen. And so they just simply will say, let's go do this. And for those of us who want to think about it and analyze it a little bit before we go into action, then it's a little bit uncomfortable to just jump into action before we've had a chance to think about it. Now, that said, organizations that are led by 8s tend to learn to just start to do what the 8 says, because that's the easiest thing. And the nice thing about the 8 is they are very able to course correct. So you've heard of that phrase, fail fast, right? So if you're not going to analyze before you just jump into action, then the probability that you're going to fail actually increases. But in as much as you can get to action and then find that fail point quickly, then you can course correct and go on to the next thing. That's kind of the MO for the 8s. That's kind of how they like to operate, because they like to stay in action all the time. So acting, acting, acting. So I've found that organizations that are under 8 leadership tend to be more of that style. The people who aren't comfortable with that style have just learned to live with it. The people who are comfortable are just fine working in that style. And it's only when that 8 leader, you know, and you know, this is one of the things that I've been approached with is, you know, I can't get my team to think for themselves. And so when I dive into that, it turns out that, you know, the 8 would like the team to be more self-sufficient and be able to, you know, think and act on their own, but they've grown so accustomed to just following the lead of the 8 that whole course has been precluded. And so you have to kind of unwind it, and you have to, you know, make sure that the 8 knows that they have to back off a little bit, let the team come to a decision, present that to the 8, and the 8 saying, okay, try that. And that way you can kind of start to unwind those behaviors. Does that make sense? I want to thank everybody again for allowing me to share this passion of mine with you, and I hope you got something out of it, and I hope you know that you can, you know, use this as a tool to help build rapport with, you know, your teammates, all the people in your organization, as well as your friends and family. And I hope you enjoy it, and don't hesitate to ever contact me if you have any questions. So thank you again. Thanks so much.